Hello, I'm Sora Luxon, and this is Magic Lesson number 40, Planetary Magick Continued, but more specifically, natal charts. Because picking up where I left off last time, I want to give a quick overview on what a natal chart, that's a birth chart, it means the same thing, an astrological birth chart, on what it is and how to use it, not only because it's an important part of astrology, of planetary magic, but also because it's going to set you up to have just gone over the basics a bit before I move forward with continuing on high occult planetary magic and its uses. Now, keep in mind, this is astrology that we're talking about. That's occult, divinatory interpretation magics, right? Mapping of the stars magically. Not to be confused with astronomy, which is the scientific study of the stars. So try not to confuse the two. And also a quick warning that I feel goes all too often unspoken. Much like the common sense of never giving out your true name, right? You never give out your magic name. Never, right? You might have a magic motto that you use publicly, but one of the things you learn almost immediately is that once you found your name, you never share it. And much like that, the exact time and place of your birth also contains a great deal of power and information that only you should be in control of ever. So don't give it out to people. Don't go waving your birth chart around. Don't go explaining your natal chart to others, right? To a trained occultist, it's pretty much the same as my being able to know every strength and weakness you have instantaneously. And then also, it's like you're handing me the written instructions on how and where to apply different leverage to shift different traits or choices or future events that might come up in your life. So obviously, if you don't want me to have that power over you, no, don't go running around naked with your correspondences and house planets and aspects on display to other people, right? They're for you to use and address as you see fit. They're for your use, your eyes only. Don't hand other people the keys to your safe. Don't do it. And maybe just one more slight admonishment or warning. I see a lot on vlogs and blogs and YouTube videos and podcasts, people trying to boil down astrology or natal charts or planetary houses into these cute, concise little phrases like, I'm an X soul in a Y body on a Z journey, right? Like I'm a Libra with a Leo's, with a Jupiter's, whatever. Or just trying to massively oversimplify the great divinatory occult art of astrology. And usually it's to make it seem easy or approachable or friendly to people. It isn't really supposed to be easy or approachable or friendly. That isn't the point. And it's also usually when it's being taught that way or explained that way, it's for likes. It's to make it seem trendy. It's to make it seem compatible to the masses. So just kind of be aware of that. If someone's saying something like, I'm, I don't know, a Taurus soul under the mask of a Libra or in the house of, it's not that simple. It never is. Saying things like that, teaching astrology in that way, oversimplifying it really takes so much of the massive amount of interpretive power inside of this art away from its user. When you simplify it, you're stripping it of how it should be approached and of all the different ways it can be useful to the person who is researching it, who does want to understand it, who does want to see where their own personal intentions might go and how to change them, how to improve their own life or bring about their own best self. If you simple it down into, well, if you just moved Jupiter, a little bit this way, or if you just approached your Gemini house that way, no. It's not that easy, and it's not meant to be used that way. So just keep that in mind. You are not any one thing. And you are not any specific fault, error, quick fix, or wonderful talent that your natal chart might point out to you. You're not any one thing. It's how everything works together, and then how you decide to approach all of those things, right? We're not simple mammals. So taking all of astrology and putting it into one quippy phrase or one very simple, look how easy this is, not a great idea, not very helpful for the user. So just something to be mindful of and maybe try to avoid a bit. Having said that it's not easy, there are some aspects of it which are pretty easy. There are 3 basics to astrology. You have the planets, which are the power, raw power, energy. You have the signs, which, as I mentioned in a previous video, the signs are the characteristics that the planets express themselves through. So if the planets are great energy, the active dynamic of the mind, the signs are how that is then expressed, what it filters through. The planets rule the signs. And then you have the houses, which are the sections of your life that these powers, which have filtered through perceivable influences and characteristics, right? The houses are what those will then affect. So this is a generalized type of diagram that you'd be dealing with in a planetary zodiac natal chart reading. Really, they go back historically. We have more modern ones today. The one you put into astro.com, right, is going to look different than this. But the thing to keep in mind is that you have circles within circles. A circle is 360 degrees. And those circles are broken into pie-like areas that describe the houses that I was just talking about. You can find free natal charts where you plug in your own info, right? You can go on the internet. Like I said, you have astro.com, Astro Cafe, I believe, will do an ascendant, descendant, depending on the horizon. I think they use your zip code to try to narrow it down in order to generate that chart for you, like where you were. Then there's an endless gauntlet of astrological apps for your phone, like actual birth chart, natal chart apps. CoStar is one that I know some people who use if you're into that sort of thing. I might remind you here that many high practicing occultists go out of their way to limit their screen time and be mindful of that. So an app of a natal chart really isn't going to give you the most meditative insight into how to approach your magic, right? Because you don't need another app to use. But if you're into that sort of thing, you could use that and then refer to the natal chart that's generated there. So what is going on, right, when you're doing this? If you go to someplace like astrocafe.com or astro.com, what you're doing is you're putting in your location where you're born and then the exact time, or as close as you can come to it, of the moment you were born. And that is what the chart is then generating from. And what it's generating is the sky the moment you took your first breath. So it's going to pay specific attention, for instance, to where the sun and moon were in relation to the horizon based on your position when you were born on the sphere of the planet Terra, Earth. It really is a picture of the sky, the position of the stars, the planets at the moment you were born. Now, in some more elitist occultic circles, where becomes very specific, right? Based on GPS, not just on maybe a zip code where a hospital was. And the moment isn't actually the moment you came into the world, but the exact second, if possible, you inhaled air from this planet for the first time. If you wanted that information, now you have it. I don't know if you'd want to use it. Most people don't. But some practicing occultists like myself, right? It's exactly where you were and the exact second you drew your first breath. And then what the sky looked like when that happened. That is what a natal chart is. Other terms you're going to need. You have the medium chali, the MC, right? That abbreviation MC. Sometimes it's referred to as middle heaven. That is usually going to show up on a natal chart from like astro.com. You have the primal triad, the sun, moon, and your ascendant or rising sign. That is what the primal triad is. Don't get confused if you see that somewhere. It's not like some other thing. It's just the all three being grouped together. AC, that abbreviation AC, is usually used as an abbreviation for the ascendant. And that's the sign of how other people perceive you. It's your costume, sort of your mask to the world. Not the core truth of who you are, but what can be seen and noted and interacted with out here with the rest of us in active manifestation. So it isn't who you are or how you see yourself, but instead how others are seeing you. It's how you appear in relation to manifestation. There's also conjunctions, oppositions, and squares. These are all important. I'll address some of them, right? But if you want more information on any of this, you can delve into those details as you choose to, right? You have your sun sign. Now, that's the big overview, right? Like, that's like the core of the self, but maybe not the most privatized self. The sun sign, that's the one when people are reading horoscopes. That's the obvious sign. What most people think of when they're considering their own zodiac. Like if someone walks up to you and says, "Hi, I'm a Leo." That's their sun sign that they're referring to. And that is, on a natal chart, just where the sun was in relation to when and where they were born. It has a lot to do with seasons, which is pretty cross-cultural, which is why it kind of sticks. That primary season of who and what they are, that conscious primary matter self. You also have the moon sign, right? That's the subconscious conversation, the emotional self. Perhaps not as on the surface as the sun sign, right? Depending on what someone's personality is like. They might hide their emotions very well, even though it's the emotions that might be running the show, right? So it might not be as obvious to guess or judge or for someone to catch a view of it, but still, the moon sign, that emotional sign, sometimes that's even more important than the sun sign because it tends to be your true heart, your mood, your feelings. And that's going to have a pretty big influence on who you are and how you approach things. If you're concerned with feeling happy, right? Or the emotion of being well, you'd look to your moon sign and not to your sun sign for that. And you'd be looking to your moon sign and paying more attention to the hints and clues that the moon sign is giving you, because your sun sign isn't going to give you that ability to approach how to feel good the way your moon sign would. So I'm going to now do like a little more detail for you. So here's that, just the basic setup of a natal chart, as I was talking about. So you have circles within circles. A circle is 360 degrees. And then all these little pie pieces, right? 6, 7, 8. These little pie pieces are houses so that you can get a better visual idea of what that looks like. And then really quick, let me get a blank piece of paper here. Really quickly, I just wanted to go over what the actual symbols for the planets are. So this might be at a little bit of an angle for you until I turn it, just so I can write it on camera. It's not the best sun, but you get the idea. It's a circle with a dot inside. That's the symbol for sun, right? You also have, let's see, you have Mars, circle with an arrow up, Venus, circle with a cross down, the moon, which should probably go over here by the sun a little bit more, right? Everyone recognizes the symbol for the moon. You have Mercury, which looks a lot like Taurus, but then has this little inverted cross. You have Saturn, has a neat little swoop at the end, and Jupiter. So there's the symbols and the planets, right? Just traditional symbols and planets. Now, if you wanted to use the more, I don't know, modern, nouveau, evolved version, you could also add in the more recent additions of, you have Uranus, Neptune, Pluto, which hopefully looks almost like a little bit of a P, right? So that would be the extended planets. In my tradition, we tend to focus on these. But if you wanted, you could use those as well. You also have symbols inside of a natal planetary chart. You have a true node symbol. Looks kind of like this. Just so you can know what the symbols are and recognize them later. Chiron, right? It's kind of like this K with like this circle. Sort of like that. Just keep in mind. You have your lunar nodes, right? So this guy, a north lunar node, and then you have your the south is the same, reversed. Probably should have thought this out a little bit better before I just started scribbling away whatever came to mind. Now, on a natal chart, these generally refer to where this would be your future up here. Anything on the north side, so that circle that we were looking at before, right? Anything up here, that's going to be, future, direction you should head in, kind of where you're evolving towards or would do best to evolve towards. South, the word south is usually a referential to what your past was. Maybe your past lives, maybe instinctual behaviors that are already very ingrained, habits like that, your comfort zones. Okay, so that's something to keep in mind. And also on a natal chart, you have this, right? Because it's actually cut into a, when you go to get one online or when you have one generated online or decide to map one out for yourself, it's actually completely cut like this. I kind of don't want to draw lines through the middle in case I want to use this, but you get the idea. So there are these bisecting lines. So the same way anything in the north, your lunar node for the north would be future, and your past would be your south lunar node. There's also a sort of a correspondence to the left and right hemispheres. So left, right, anything of this bisecting line to the left or right of that bisecting line. Where left is considered freedom. If you see a lot of things congregating or aggregating on the left side of someone's birth chart, that's kind of a freedom reading. I'm trying to think of another way to interpret that. Starseeds that feel that they're new souls would probably have a lot of planetary correspondences over here. People who feel like they're just figuring things out for the very first time in their life, things are always brand new and coming at them quick, they're always learning at the lightest speed, that's a very freedom relevant reading. Whereas on the other side of that, dissected hemisphere, you have that right side of the hemisphere. When you see a lot of congregations of planets over here, it tends to be more of a faded reading. So maybe someone who's an old soul that's on who knows which lifetime, but whatever they're playing out now can be seen as the relevant lessons that they're needing to learn now. So it's not something they're really going to be able to get around. It's something that's going to happen that way if you believe in that sort of thing. That's more of a faded reading. So just keep in mind, future, past, freedom, fate. Just overall so that you know that as well. And then also, very important, I'm going to use the same piece of paper again. So there's all our planetary names and symbols. You're going to need to have memorized the signs, names and symbols. So you have Aries, kind of connected to the G in the word signs. Try not to worry about that too much, right? You have Gemini, not the best handwriting. It's kind of hard to keep it on screen for you here. That's what Gemini looks like. Cancer. Most people recognize Cancer. See if I can do a half decent job of it here. Not too bad. It's those kind of sixes that are revolving around each other. Leo, the lion, the child and king. Leo. I don't know why I put Leah. Leo. Virgo. Kind of making a mess. Virgo is kind of like, it loops back through that last line a little bit, its symbol. Libra is actually one of the easier ones to kind of draw, just like that. You have Scorpio. You have Sagittarius. You have Capricorn. Kind of didn't realize how long it would take me to draw all these out. You have Aquarius. Pisces. Right? So there you go. There's your 12 signs. If I got them all, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. What did I miss? Who did I miss? Capricorn, Scorpio, Libra, Virgo, Leo, Cancer. Oh, Taurus. Sorry, Tauruses. I didn't mean to forget you. There you go. So there's your signs. So names, symbols. This is something you really need to have memorized before you can move on much further. Same goes for the planetary symbols and names. And of course, you have those elemental attributes that I mentioned where, Aries, for instance, is fire, cardinal, and assertive. So it's a cardinal fire sign. I could go through and map all these for you. Maybe I'll just list them off. So Gemini is mutable air. Cancer is cardinal water. Leo is fixed fire. Virgo is mutable earth. Libra is cardinal air assertive. You have Scorpio, which is fixed water. Sagittarius, which is mutable fire. Capricorn, which is cardinal earth. Aquarius, sorry, I didn't realize it was off camera there. You have Aquarius, which is fixed air, assertive fixed air. Pisces, which is mutable water. And Taurus, which is fixed earth. I might have already said that, but yeah, Taurus, fixed earth, when you think of that stubborn Taurus, right? So keep that in mind. So the 12 zodiacs, the 7 traditional or 10 more modern planets. And then something else when you go to start interpreting your natal charts. So here's a natal chart again. This is a blank one, right? When you look at a real natal chart, like if you put in your own to get online, what you're going to see is you're going to see the planets falling by degrees into specific places within this map. And then you create angles from where those planets are being interpreted, right? So you interpret the angles of where the planets are being mapped from. So say, I don't know, your moon wound up here in your 11th house and that happened for you to be Virgo. I don't know. You're going to have a corresponding line that moves towards the center from the moon. and then it is going to angle somewhere else. So those angles in the center, that is what you're really working with. So just keep that in mind. Kind of wish I hadn't drawn that there now, but just try to ignore it. So when you have your houses and you go to interpret, your houses are, let's see. Well, your first house is the house of self. I guess I could just write that in for you. So the self, that's life, body, beginnings, spirit, right? That fifth element, spirit. That's the house of self. The second house, that's money, possessions, livelihood maybe in some ways. Sometimes it can relate to self-worth as well, because what it's depicting is different things of worth. That worth tends to be more physical in nature, but sometimes someone could be having their self-worth affected in their second house. Your third house is the house of communications. Communications, that's your immediate environment. I'm trying to think of a better way to say that. Siblings usually fall into this house. Close relatives, sometimes travel a little bit. Sometimes this is referred to as the house of the queen. Fourth house, we have, what is fourth? Family. So you have parents, the city you live in, sometimes a few mystical things, not overwhelmingly big. It's really the house of family. So if you don't have a family, it's still the house of family, because it could have to do with how you grew up or how you were raised, those kind of the roots of your psyche, right? A lot of those conditions that you have been behaviorally conditioned to from your upbringing, whatever it may have been, that's going to fall into this house. The sixth house, or where are we with the fifth house? The fifth house is the house of creativity. So here you have pleasure, childish aspects of the self, and that's children. Creativity meaning giving birth. Sometimes that's an act of creation. Doing good things tends to fall into the house of creativity. Anything that you find fun, pleasant, activities and actions which are enjoyable, that's going to be in this house. The sixth house is the house of service, I guess is one way to put it. You could call it the house of health. How would you say this? If you're going to get an injury or a sickness, it's going to fall into the sixth house usually. Things to do with work that's in labor to others or in sacrifice to others. Anything that you might feel that you're a slave to. So you might be serving a bad habit in some way, that could fall into this house. Some enmities, you could have those in here. It really is the house of health and service. The seventh house, you have marriage. It's usually just called the marriage house, but that's not always the best interpretation of it. That means marriage doesn't mean a man and a woman in astrological interpretation. It means committed relationships. That could be a business partnership, like a marriage between companies. It could also be any type of committed partnership that isn't necessarily having to do with a marital status. Very informed, engaged in, loyal, fundamental relationships. So any kind of spouse, right? Sometimes this can speak to how you're going to end up living in old age. or where you're going to end up living towards the end of your life. Eighth house, this is the house of death and regeneration. I'll just put that on there just in case you can read my scrawl and you want to refer to any of this later. It's really just more, I'm using this as a tool to remember what I've already said on video as I'm writing it down. So the eighth house is the house of death and regeneration. That's inheritance is going to fall into this house. Deaths upcoming. Money coming back in that might have been lost. Sometimes laziness, idleness falls into this house. It's a house of resources, so what your resources are at any given moment. Sex falls into the eighth house a lot because, again, of that regeneration. The ninth house, the God house, is the house of higher education, very high ascended mental explorations. I'm going to put philosophy. I'm going to put mystical matters. That's how I would think of it first and foremost. Divination, astrology would fall into this house. High level college or very high functioning career education. Foreign travels, interrelated foreign aspects and relations. That's all going to be here in the ninth. In the 10th house, you have, this is your career house. That's really what it is. Now, career doesn't just mean work. It could mean what your careership is. So honor is a word that's often attributed to the 10th house. Like if your career is military, honor is going to have to do with this house a lot. You have action here. Reputation, status. Advancement in your career possibly. Any kind of change. That's all going to fall here in the career house. 11th house, that's friends and hopes. That's usually how you'll see this referred to, friends and hopes, or sometimes it's called friends and well-wishers. And that has to do with groups around you, possibly looser groups or organizations that you're involved with. A lot of church functions might fall into here. Social functions, if you're part of a fan club or fan page, right? Wishes, things that you don't have yet, but that you do spend time thinking about. That's going to be here. Also, gifts. So hopes, wishes, gifts, friends, groups. That's all here in the 11th house. The 12th house, well, much like the first house is self, what do you think the 12th is going to be? I would call this the self-undoing. So if the first house is the self-doing, the 12th house is the self-undoing. And what that means is hidden things. Enemies will be, this is where your problems, your conflicts are described here. Suffering, any sufferings will be described here. Weaknesses, possible dangers coming up. Secrets, for better or worse. Those are all going to be things having to do with the 12th house. Okay? So when you're reading your chart, it's just kind of a quick overview. I'm trying to go quick. It's getting really long. This is going to be a really long video. So when you go to read your natal chart, just understand that generally planets that'll be mapped out here, those are the what, right? The signs moving around the chart, which again, you'll see all those signs. Those are the how and why, right? So the what moves through the how and why. And then you have the where. And the where is going to be the house that falls into, right? So you might have the moon, which is the raw power, right? The planet inside your first house. So that's where it is. So the moon is going to relate most to yourself, right? But it's, let's say it falls inside, let's say, I don't know, Gemini's here or something. That is the aspect it's relating through. I don't know if I should use the word aspect, because aspect actually means something else. But you have, just keep in mind, you have, right, the planet is that raw power. The sign is the window of glass that light is filtering through, and the house is where it's landing. So that's another way to think of it. Hopefully that helps a little bit. Some other things, just really quick in passing. As I was saying, 360 degrees in a circle. So what a natal chart is actually doing is breaking down those 360 degrees into these 30 sign influential houses, right? That's 30 degrees each, right? How do I show you that? Let's see. This little area, right, from here to here, from this line to this line, that is 30 degrees. So all of these put together makes 360, and each house is 30, okay? And every 30 degrees of influence, so you can have aspects which are harmonious or aspects which are disharmonious, and that is going to have to do with these angles that you're going to find in the middle that are going to be generated when you put in the location of your birth and the exact moment you took your first breath, right? The time you were born. So, and that's when you'll get all these angles in the center depending on where your houses are. And aspects that are harmonious, I don't know, let me list some for you. You have a 60 degree aspect in any angle. Like, let's say there were an angle in here that looks like this for you. This is a 60 degree aspect, right? 30 and then 30 again, right? Both of these together, 1, 2, 30 plus 30 equals 60 degrees. So if you see that angle in here, that 60 degree angle, that's known as a sextile. That's considered a harmonious aspect. You also have 120 degrees, right? Double that up. So from here to here, like if it was all, you have an angle that looks like this line here and this one, right? You have this 120. That's a harmonious aspect. That's called a trine. The most harmonious you could ever possibly have would be a perfect triangle. I can't really show it to you in here because I've already written on here, right? But if you had an absolute perfect triangle angle, created a grand triangle, the power manifestation of the grand triangle, incredibly rare to have the grand trine, but that's also a harmonious aspect. And like there are harmonious aspects, there's disharmonious or inharmonious aspects and influences. Those would be the square, which is 90 degrees, right? If you find that. Sometimes you'll have two aspects. What this really is would be two aspects working against each other, right? That's what's creating that. So that creates, conflict. When you think of a square, like, hey man, that guy's square, don't be square. Like in Pulp Fiction, right? It means not cool. It's going to create problems if you have a square. Oppositions, where you have two planets that are 180 degrees instead of 90, so 90 doubled, right? That's also disharmonious or inharmonious. It's an oppositional force or oppositional aspect, oppositions. Those aren't good. That tends to be personal demon type stuff. Because what you have there, I mean, it's really bad. You have an eternal planetary war. You have those two forces going at each other, just battling each other kind of head on forever like that. So that's considered an aspect that isn't great. You also have things known as conjunctions, where sometimes maybe you'll have, like, I don't know, this would be a weird conjunction, but let's say your sun and your moon, right, really are, like, perfectly aligned with each other, joined. That's what conjunct or conjunction means, right? Right next to each other. That could be good or bad. That's going to depend on the sign and the house, and whether, really, what it's going to depend on is whether those two planets, whatever's conjuncting, whether they get along together, like whether they travel well, are they good companions or not? Because if they aren't, there's going to be struggles and tiffs and little battles, right? And if they are, then it's going to make things smoother and easier. So that's going to depend on that. Trying to think if there's anything else I should just quickly go over that might be helpful to you when you're interpreting your natal chart for the first time. Try to keep in mind, right? Aries, that's image and independence. Aries is the trailblazer. Gemini is the talker. So you have communication and connections in that sign. Cancer is the empath. So nurturing and security. Leo is the showman, right? The king and the child, performance, creativity. Virgo, the purist, efficiency and logic. Libra is the peacemaker, harmonies, balancing acts. That's Libra. Scorpio. Scorpio is really the mystic, very sensual, intimacy, transformation, that sort of thing. Sagittarius, the philosopher, exploration, thinking, just thought itself, mental exploration. Capricorn, the planner. You have a lot of discipline and order in that sign. Aquarius, I'd call Aquarius the rebel, or maybe the revolutionary. Aquarius is kind of always half spun off the planet already. So social change, liberation. Pisces, the dreamer, right? Idealism. Pisces has a lot to do with death and rebirth. And then Taurus, you have, the grower. That's what Taurus really is. Productivity, stability. That's Taurus. So that's all good to keep in mind as well. I think for now, I'm just going to leave it there. Here, throw that one back up for you. I don't know how much of it you can actually read. So that should just get you started. Just a quick overview on a lot of the basics. I know you can't really read my handwriting, but hopefully that helps a little bit. And now that we've gone over the signs as symbols and the planets as symbols and some of the bigger characteristics that they all kind of have to do with, that's really going to help you moving forward as I move on with Planetary Magick in more depth. Until next time.